The University of Idaho is revamping their composting system. And that got me thinking, what happens to our food waste? Where does it go? Why is composting important? And why is it more sustainable than just throwing it out? So I thought I'd follow my food waste to learn where it goes. On the way, I talked with a few folks who are part of the composting program. This is Austin.
I'm a student here at the University of Idaho. I communicate between the Sustainability Center and Sodexo, and I unload all the compost on campus.
This is Annie.
I'm a junior at the University of Idaho. My job is the compost technician for the Sustainability Center.
And this is Allison.
I work with Soil and Water Systems Department. I'm an instructor for the Sustainable Food Systems degree path.
With their help, we're going to learn about the composting process and why it matters. First, let's talk about food waste. When you want to get rid of food waste, you have two options, throwing it into a landfill or composting it. In the landfill option, the food is produced, eaten, the waste is collected, and then that waste is sent to a landfill. In Moscow, Idaho, our waste is trucked 200 miles all the way to a landfill in Oregon. This creates the obvious problem of adding tons of CO2 to the atmosphere, but it also creates methane, which is an even more potent greenhouse gas than CO2. Why does food create methane in a landfill, but it doesn't when it's composted?
When food waste goes to landfill, it just gets mixed in with everything else and compressed, and there's no oxygen. It then produces methane gas.
The microbes, bacteria, and fungi that eat the food also need oxygen. If there's no oxygen, the microbes can't do their job.
Those beneficial relationships with microbes and fungi and bacteria aren't happening. Usually not enough carbon, and there's not enough air.
So the food never breaks down.
It either never does, or it takes a really, really long time.
So what's the alternative? Well, I hope you know where I'm going with this. It's composting.
Composting is a natural process. It happens whether we do anything or not. We expedite that process by adding certain components.
In the composting option, it starts out the same. Food is produced, eaten, the waste is collected, but instead of heading to the landfill, it heads to the composting site. It's Austin's job to pick up the food waste from the dining center.
The source of the compost is the leftover scraps that everyone has after each meal, and it's also the scraps that we have when we prepare the meals.
He delivers about 2,000 pounds of food waste each week. After the drop-off, it's now Annie's job to process the compost.
When I arrive, I start off right off the bat on mixing food waste and bedding to create the compost. It will be 1 bucket of the skid steer, that's our measurement. It'll be 1 bucket of food waste per 3 buckets of bedding. And then that will be put into the tub grinder and it will be spit out into the first loading bay.
So what's the purpose of mixing the bedding with the food? Well, remember all those microbe pals that need oxygen to digest the food? Well, they need other stuff too.
We call the food waste green and we call the bedding brown, and you need a certain ratio of green to brown to have a good nitrogen carbon ratio to create enough fuel for the microbes to break down that pile.
In other words,
We're giving food basically to the microbes.
once a week, Annie turns the compost piles to oxygenate them. She also monitors temperatures and moisture in order to create the perfect conditions for decomposition. If it's too hot, too cold, too wet, or too dry, the microbes can't do their job. But if everything goes just right, that pile of food and bedding decomposes into compost. So within these two systems, you can imagine the landfill option as a linear system and the compost option as a circular system. At the landfill, all of the energy flows one way and one way only. The energy used to grow the food in the beginning is buried and lost in the landfill, or it turns into greenhouse gases. Another problem is that as we add more waste to the linear system, it piles up at the end. It has nowhere else to go. Once it's in the landfill, it never comes back out. So the pile gets bigger and bigger, and we have to keep making more piles. You can see how this can become a problem as time goes on. But with composting, the energy used to grow the food is saved and used again to grow the next batch of food.
Food waste is bad no matter what. It's not great, but it can be mitigated somewhat if we can compost it and then add it back into the soil.
So that's exactly what we do with it. The compost created is used to enrich the soil at the student farm.
It's a really cool project for students to work on because it's not ideal soil at the moment for growing. There's a lot of improvements that can be made, and the compost goes a long way to helping that.
So not only does composting help close the circle of food waste, it can also improve poor soils and make them more productive. The student farm grows a variety of produce from lettuce to potatoes.
Here at the Soil Stewards Farm, we sell a portion of our produce to dining in the fall. That food waste gets recycled and then eventually comes back to the farm, so we're creating a full circle.
So if we are talking about sustainable systems, a circular system is always better than a linear system. And we aren't just talking about food. This goes for everything we use and discard. Plastic, metal, Wood, water, and clothing are all examples of things we throw away that still have value. Energy went into making these things, and that energy is lost when we throw them out.
Before the composting program, I never really understood where our food waste was going. What I love about my job is that I'm able to just be a big help to the environment. Lowering our carbon footprint's a really big deal, especially with climate change.
I was raised on a farm, and so I was very conscious of how food gets to my plate, what's involved in making it, but I did not fully understand how waste is accumulated and disposed of. I honestly did not know what compost was before I started this job.
But I never really thought about how you could dispose of your food waste in such a recyclable manner. This is an entire circle on campus, so it's really cool to be a part of it and help get it started.
And what I'm hoping to get out of this, the whole sustainability center, Sodexo collaboration, is that UI could be a campus that composts. The student body, the faculty, the staff, everyone could identify as, we are UI and we compost.
That's it.
Wow.
We did it.
Start composting!